Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I was born in a no-name little town called Iron Hill, tucked in the southeast corner of Nebraska where the corn grows taller than most of the people, and everyone knows everyone, or thinks they do. I spent 18 years in that town. In all that time, only two things ever happened that truly shook it. The first was my birth, obviously. You're welcome. The second thing, well, that one was the sort of tragedy you don't read about in the papers because small towns bury their monsters with their secrets. And if you think that's melodramatic, just wait. This isn't a ghost story. This isn't about something crawling out of the woods. This is about what happens when a quiet, normal town breeds something it doesn't notice until it's too late. It was fall, my freshman year of high school. I remember because Halloween decorations were up, but nobody was wearing coats yet. Sundays in Iron Hill were dead quiet. After church and family dinners, you could walk the streets and barely see a car. My friends and I used to ride our bikes around town after dinner, just soaking in the last of the daylight. That Sunday, I was riding with Nathan, Troy, and Emily. We were heading down Saddlehorn Avenue when Ryan Carson, a kid from our class, came flying down the hill on his bike like his life depended on it. "Yo, guys, the Holloway's garage is on fire." We didn't need more. We tore off behind Ryan, tires screeching around corners until we saw the smoke curling into the sky like a tornado made of ash. The entire backyard of the Holloway house was glowing orange. The garage was engulfed. Cops were already pushing people back. Firefighters were yelling. We barely got a look before one of the officers barked, "Back up! Everybody back!" There was a pop, then a series of them. Bang! 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 The firefighters dropped their hoses and ran. I'll never forget that. These were grown men, trained and calm as hell, bolting away from a burning garage like kids scared of fireworks. We didn't wait around. We tore home, our bikes suddenly not fast enough. I remember looking back once, just once, and the fire had turned the sky pink. Everyone was buzzing about it. They say someone was inside. Kevin Holloway didn't show up to school today. No, it wasn't him, it was his uncle or something. The Holloways were a big family. Kevin had two brothers, a younger sister, and his grandparents lived with them. It was hard to guess who might have been in the garage that night. But Tuesday morning, we didn't have to guess anymore. We all filed into the gym. You could tell it was serious because Mr. Hoffman, the principal, looked pale. Even Coach Garber wasn't chewing his gum like usual. Standing at the front of the gym was Sheriff Mallory and two deputies. When he stepped forward and took his hat off, everyone got silent. "Folks," he started, "I know y'all heard about the fire at the Holloway property Sunday night, and I'm sorry to tell you this way, but we lost one of our own." He paused. It was Kevin. You could feel the oxygen leave the gym. Girls gasped. A couple of the guys just stared. "Right now," the sheriff continued, "we're trying to understand what happened. We're asking, if any of you knew Kevin, if you noticed anything unusual about him lately, please come talk to us. Not here, not now, but call, reach out." That was when the feeling shifted. Not grief, not yet. Confusion. Why were the cops asking us to tell them about Kevin? He'd died in a fire. Wasn't that enough? Apparently not. By Wednesday, rumors were flying. Someone said Kevin had been building fireworks and one went off. Someone else said his older brother got into drugs and the fire was some kind of accident. But none of us really knew until Thursday night. That's when Iron Hill had one of its famous town meetings. You know the kind. Folding chairs in the rec center, lemonade pitchers, everybody whispering as they filed in. I wasn't invited. My parents went. I was supposed to finish my homework and take out the trash. I did neither. I played GoldenEye until I heard the garage door rumble open. When they walked in, I knew something was wrong. My dad looked like he did the night my uncle died in a car wreck. My mom sat down like someone had kicked the breath out of her. "Sit," my dad said, Did I do something? I asked. Number, this is about Kevin. They told me everything. Kevin hadn't just accidentally set his garage on fire. He'd been making something. A bomb. He'd been using instructions he found online, and it went off while he was assembling it. The garage exploded. The rest of the house only caught fire because of the blast. His little brother had been inside watching TV. He survived only because the living room was on the far side of the house. Then they told me the part that stuck in my throat for days. Kevin had written it all down. There was a spiral notebook, half burned, that they found under what was left of his workbench. It laid out everything. His plan was to build a working bomb and place it under St. Lucas Church on Veterans Day. The place would have been full, over 100 people, most of the town. He wasn't targeting anyone in particular. He just wanted to hurt people. My mom was crying again by this point. My dad just stared at the wall. He would have wiped out half the town, Dad said. He really would have done it. Here's the thing. Kevin wasn't a loner, not exactly. He was quiet, but he wasn't bullied. He didn't get into fights. He sat in the second row of Spanish class and laughed at dumb jokes sometimes. I didn't like him, but I didn't hate him. He was just there. So when people started saying things like he always seemed a little off or he didn't smile enough, I didn't buy it. That's just people trying to make sense of something that doesn't. The cops wouldn't tell us everything that was in the journal, but someone leaked enough. He referenced Columbine, said he understood those guys, said he wanted to be remembered. Some nights I lie awake wondering what would have happened if the fuse hadn't gone off early. Would I still be here? Would anyone? The Holloway family moved away 6 weeks later. The house was bulldozed by spring. They turned the lot into a park, Holloway Field. No one says the name anymore. We had a school counselor come in every week for 2 months. Nobody talked to her. Some kids made edgy jokes about Kevin for a while. That stopped after Troy decked someone in the lunchroom for saying, "Guess Holloway got his wish." No charges were filed. It's been 19 years. I live in Denver now. Iron Hill's still there. Still quiet. Still the kind of town where people wave from the porch and the diner still does cinnamon rolls bigger than your hand. But every Veterans Day I remember. I remember that garage burning like hell itself had cracked open. I remember the sound of the firefighters running away. I remember the moment I realized that a kid I went to Spanish class with tried to kill everyone I'd ever known, and failed, only by accident. Sometimes horror isn't what you see. Sometimes horror is what almost happened. And in Iron Hill, Nebraska, the worst thing that ever happened was the thing that didn't. I never wanted to work in a mortuary. That sort of job just wasn't part of the plan. But plans don't matter much when life falls apart. 3 years ago, I moved to Wexler Ridge, a rural town in northern Missouri, where the population's mostly farmers, truckers, and retirees. The kind of place where people wave to each other even if they've never spoken. I didn't know anyone. That was the point. My name's Nate Carver. I came here to disappear, to leave behind the noise of St. Louis and the memory of the crash that took my fiancée. She was driving. I was in the passenger seat. I survived. She didn't. You can't bury someone you love and not feel like part of you died too. A family friend helped me get the night attendant position at Hollow Brook Mortuary. It was quiet, easy work. Just paperwork, logging, basic prep, and maintaining the cooler. The owner, Mr. Landry, was kind but distant, probably in his 70s, and mostly left me alone. That was fine by me. The first 6 months were uneventful. Just me, silence, and the dead. Then, last year in October, I opened the cooler at the start of my shift like always, and saw myself lying inside. At first I laughed. I thought maybe the night shift and the solitude had finally gotten to me. But it wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't just someone who looked like me. The face was mine, down to the faint scar on my right brow, the chipped tooth I've had since junior high, even the tiny freckle on my collarbone. It wore the standard white morgue sheet. The tag around its toe was blank. I opened the intake log. Nothing. I double-checked. No new bodies had come in. The last registered entry was 2 days ago. I remember backing away slowly, bumping into the prep counter and knocking a tray of embalming tools onto the floor. I didn't call anyone. Who would I call? What would I even say? "Hey Landry, there's a dead version of me in the cooler. Can you pop down here and take a look?" Right. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I processed the body, I shaved it, I washed it. I put it into the retort and watched it turn to ash. My hands were trembling the whole time. When I swept up the remains, I dumped them without tagging them, without sealing them in the usual container. I couldn't bear the thought of me sitting on a shelf. I didn't sleep that morning. I stared at the ceiling and convinced myself it was a stress dream, that I'd imagined it. But the image stayed sharp in my head, and the next night, when I opened the cooler, he was there again. Same lifeless eyes, same blank toe tag, same me. It kept happening. Once every few days at first. Then it became every night. Each time I opened the cooler, my own dead face stared back, the skin slowly changing. Some nights he had my old haircut from college. Once he had a black eye I hadn't had in over a decade. I tried asking Landry if there were any night security cameras. He said no. It was an old building, and with the cost of upkeep and utilities, he never saw the point. I wanted to scream. I started keeping a journal, describing what I saw, taking notes. On some nights, the corpse's expression changed, a twisted smile, one eye slightly open. One night I swear the thing blinked. I began leaving the corpse untouched, waiting to see if Landry or the day crew noticed. But nothing ever came up. No notes, no questions. So I began testing it. I left it on the prep table once under the surgical lamp. The next night, gone. Back in the cooler. Fresh again. Another time I made a small cut behind its ear with a scalpel. Something I could recognize. Just a tiny slit. The next night, the same cut was on me when I looked in the mirror. Not deep, but there. Like a faint scar I couldn't remember getting. I called out sick the next night, slept with the lights on. I dreamt of someone knocking on my door. When I woke up, there were 2 sets of muddy footprints on my porch. I hadn't been outside in days. A year passed. A full, grim, awful year of cremating myself nearly every night. I stopped dating, stopped socializing. I stopped being me. Just existed from shift to shift, eating instant noodles and watching the shadows stretch on my ceiling. Eventually, I developed a routine. Enter the mortuary, open the cooler, check for him, ignore him, and finish the paperwork. If he was there, I cremated him. Always alone. But one night I couldn't do it. I stared at the body, my body, his body, whatever the hell it was, and I broke down, slid against the cold tile floor and cried harder than I had since the funeral. Then I left it there. Just closed the cooler and walked away. The next night when I returned, expecting madness, an investigation, something, the cooler was empty. For the first time since that first horrifying encounter, there was no duplicate. I laughed out loud. I danced. I thought it was over. I thought wrong. It started again, but differently. I was standing in front of the mirror brushing my teeth when I noticed a bruise on my jaw. One I didn't remember getting. Then I noticed the scar from behind the ear. Only now it was fresher. Red and irritated. The next night at work, I opened the cooler, and it was me again. But not dead. This version of me was alive. Eyes open, breathing shallow, chest barely rising. He lay motionless but conscious. His gaze was hollow, distant. I panicked and slammed the cooler shut. I ran outside into the dark parking lot, vomiting by the dumpster. I didn't go back in that night. When I returned the following evening, the cooler was empty again. 2 weeks later, he knocked on my door. It was raining. Wind howled through the trees. And there he was, drenched, standing under my porch light, wearing my clothes. Not just similar ones. Mine. The hoodie with the bleach stain. The jeans with the ripped pocket. I stared through the peephole, heart pounding. He didn't speak, just waited, silent, staring. I backed away, grabbed the bat from under my bed, dialed 911 with shaking hands. When I looked again, he was gone. Police found no one. No footprints in the mud, nothing on the doorbell cam. Just static. I finally told Landry everything. He listened silently. Then he walked to the back of the embalming room and unlocked a drawer, pulled out a thick folder, yellowed with age. Inside were photos, notes, old morgue logs. He laid them out like confession. "You're not the first," he said. "It happened to my father, and to his. Our family's run Hollow Brook since the 1890s. Every generation, it finds one of us." "What is it?" I asked, breath shallow. He shook his head. "No name, no origin, just a pattern, a reflection that starts appearing, first dead, then alive, then it tries to take your place. It can't truly exist unless you let it. How do I stop it?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Stop feeding it." So I stopped. No more cremations, no more recognition. I ignored him, in the cooler, at my window, on the roads. He'd stand outside sometimes, watching, waiting. Once I saw him standing by my mailbox and just walked past him like he wasn't there. And after a few weeks, he faded. The bruises went away. The scar lightened. I felt human again. Until last week. Landry was found dead in his office, slumped over the desk. Heart failure, they said. And when I arrived for my shift last night, the cooler was already open, and inside wasn't just one version of me. There were three, each staring with different expressions, one sad, one angry, and one smiling. I've locked the door. I've disabled the phone. I'm writing this by hand, surrounded by embalming fluid and the quiet hum of the cooler. I know now this town never lets you leave. Hollow Brook isn't on every map. It's a place people come to disappear, but what they don't realize is that something here waits to fill the space they leave behind. You don't get second chances, you just get replaced. If someone finds this, tell them I tried. I fought it. But tonight, the smile on the third one's face looked too real, too sure. I don't think I'm the original anymore. And the cooler is calling. In the beginning, I moved to Sycamore Ridge for peace. That's all I really wanted after 33 years as a corrections officer at the state prison. Peace. Nothing fancy. Just a place where I could sit on my porch in the morning with a cup of coffee and listen to birds instead of keys jangling and metal doors slamming. I'd seen too many fights, too many suicides, too many things I couldn't unsee. My pension came through, and once I turned in my badge, I told myself I'd find some quiet corner of Missouri and never look back. Sycamore Ridge looked like that quiet corner. It was a sleepy town about 2.5 hours from where I used to live, maybe 1,000 people total. You had to take a narrow 2-lane road past endless soy fields to get there, and when you did, it felt like stepping back 30 years. There was a single gas station with 2 pumps, a diner that served breakfast all day, and a post office the size of a shed. The houses weren't cookie-cutter suburbs either. Most were old ranch-style places from the 60s or earlier, with wide yards and deep driveways. I bought one at the end of Sycamore Lane. 3 beds, 2 baths, yellow siding, small deck out back. Needed a little paint and some TLC, but the bones were good. The realtor said it had sat empty for a few years after the previous owner passed. She didn't say anything else, and I didn't ask. The first few days were spent settling in, unpacking, stocking up on basic tools from the local hardware shop, figuring out trash days, things like that. I'd nod to neighbors when I saw them, but mostly kept to myself. I wasn't used to making small talk, not after decades of being trained to keep my guard up. Still, the town felt friendly enough, just reserved. Lots of folks seemed older. I didn't see many kids playing in yards. Everyone waved, but few talked long. That changed on the fifth evening. It was around 6:30 when someone knocked at my door. I opened it to find a man in his 50s, clean-shaven, tucked-in flannel shirt, slight gut, and a clipboard in hand. "Evening," he said, offering a quick smile. "Name's Marvin. I'm part of the neighborhood patrol group we got going. Welcome to the Ridge." "Thanks," I said. "Just moved in last week?" "Yep. Saw the U-Haul," he said with a nod. "Anyway, figured I'd stop by and let you know about our watch. Nothing official, just a group of us who keep an eye on things. We take turns driving the neighborhoods at night, make sure nothing funny's going on. Small town like this, it's usually dead quiet, but you know, better safe than sorry." I hesitated. "You guys actually see much trouble?" He shrugged. "Once in a while, we get out-of-towners poking around empty houses. There's a few places on the edge of town that attract squatters or worse. Drug stuff sometimes, but mostly it's just being visible. Keeps things quiet." I looked at the clipboard. "You need volunteers?" "Wouldn't hurt. You just take a shift once a week. Midnight to 3 a.m., patrol your assigned loop. We give you a reflective vest and a map. Don't need to get out of the car or nothing. We observe, report, and stay safe." I paused. I didn't have much else going on. "All right," I said. "I'm in." Marvin smiled wide. "Appreciate it, Jim. That's your name, right?" I hadn't told him. "Still," I nodded. "Yeah, Jim." That Friday night was my first shift. I had a red thermos full of coffee, an old playlist of classic rock on low, and the map Marvin had given me. My loop covered 5 streets, mostly residential, quiet, tree-lined lanes. I drove slow with my headlights on dim, just doing laps. A few porch lights were still on. One guy in a robe came out to grab his paper early. Another walked his dog and gave me a casual wave. It felt peaceful, almost therapeutic, like watching over a world that finally didn't feel hostile. Weeks passed, same routine. Nothing ever happened. Once a month, the group met at the community center. It wasn't much. A bunch of plastic chairs and bad coffee. Marvin ran the meetings. There was also a woman named Carol, who took attendance like a teacher, and a tall, stiff guy named Earl who mostly just watched people and didn't say much. They always said the same thing: stay in the car, don't intervene, report anything unusual. "Think of yourselves like the eyes and ears," Marvin would say, "not the hands." It all seemed normal enough, until the night everything changed. It was late October, a Wednesday night, cold enough that my windshield needed scraping before I could start my route. At around 2:05 a.m., I was driving along Brook Hollow, one of the farthest streets in my loop. There were more trees than houses out there, and a few of the homes looked neglected. Overgrown yards, broken mailboxes, the kind of places that sit forgotten. That's when I saw them. 2 men. One crouched near the side door of a small house that looked abandoned, gray paint peeling, blinds askew. The man was using something, probably a crowbar. He pried at the frame, and within seconds the door gave. The second guy came out from behind the house, looking around before slipping inside. No masks, no hurry. They moved like they knew no one was watching. My stomach dropped. I pulled to the side and went for my phone. Before I could unlock the screen, headlights flooded my rear view. A black pickup. I hadn't heard it, hadn't seen it approach. The truck stopped directly behind me. 3 men got out. One held a flashlight. One had something heavy in his hand. They walked toward me slowly, like they weren't in a rush. The tallest one tapped my window lightly. I didn't roll it down, didn't even make eye contact. I threw the car in drive and pulled forward fast. A loud crack hit my back window and I flinched. I didn't stop to check. I just kept driving, cutting corners until I hit Main Street. No one followed. At the next red light, I checked my mirror again. The truck was gone. My hands shook as I reached back and felt a spiderweb crack in the glass. But that's not what scared me the most. It was the face I saw as I sped off, the man standing by the truck watching me. He didn't wear a mask. He didn't hide. He stood under a street lamp plain as day. It was Marvin. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark of my kitchen until dawn. At 9 a.m., I called the sheriff's department. The dispatcher sounded half asleep and told me a deputy would swing by sometime today. Around 11 o'clock, a young guy showed up, uniformed, early 30s, polite. I told him what I saw: the break-in, the men, the truck, the damage to my car. I didn't name Marvin at first, just gave him a full description. He looked, bored. "That house has been empty a while," he said. "Might have just been the owners or someone checking it out." I pushed back. "It was 2 o'clock in the morning. They broke in." He shrugged. "We get calls like that from time to time. There's no one living there, so, technically, not a burglary unless someone reports missing property." I stared at him. "So you're not going to check it out?" He tapped at his notepad. "I'll file the report. We'll swing by if there's time." I swallowed hard. "You know Marvin? Runs the neighborhood watch?" "Sure. Good guy. Been around a long time." I almost said something. Almost. But I didn't. After that day, everything changed. Carol stopped replying to my texts. Earl looked away when I saw him at the diner. No more meeting invites. No more shift reminders. It was like I'd been quietly erased. Marvin walked past my house 3 times the next week, whistling softly. Once he waved. I didn't wave back. The black truck, I saw it parked 2 streets over one afternoon, just idling. When I walked past it a few hours later, it was gone. Doug, my actual neighbor, started mowing his lawn at night. Not late enough to be illegal, but late enough to send a message. I kept to myself, closed the blinds, bought heavier locks, installed a camera over the porch, but it disconnected constantly. I called the sheriff again, but they always said they'd follow up and never did. One night, someone left a dead squirrel in my mailbox. No note, just blood and fur and silence. Another night, I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching outside. I peeked through the blinds and saw 3 silhouettes standing at the end of my driveway. They didn't come closer. They didn't knock. They just stood there and waited. I don't know what's happening in Sycamore Ridge. I don't know if it's drugs, trafficking, illegal sales of property, or something else entirely. What I do know is this: the neighborhood watch isn't watching for criminals. They are the criminals. They use the watch as cover, ride around under the guise of safety, check which homes are empty or unmonitored. The ones they know no one will investigate. They break in, take what they want, and the town looks the other way. Because everyone's in on it. The sheriff, the deputy, maybe even the diner owner, maybe even the guy who sold me this house. I haven't left Sycamore Ridge yet. I should have, but moving means letting them win. Or maybe it means they follow me wherever I go. Either way, I sleep with the lights off now, because I know they're watching, but I've started watching too. I was 17 when we left everything behind. My cousin Molly and I had just graduated high school, and before the ink on our diplomas was dry, we were packed into the back of my uncle's weather-beaten Chevy, watching the skyline of our hometown disappear behind us. We weren't running from anything. We were running toward something, a new life, a chance to start over. See, my youngest aunt, Charlotte, had married a man who owned a dairy farm out in a nowhere kind of place called Fairmill, Texas. She said he needed help, and somehow that small request turned into a mass migration. Grandparents, cousins, uncles, aunts, our whole family rolled into Fairmill like a caravan. Our roots didn't stretch there, but we planted them anyway. Fairmill was the kind of town where stop signs outnumbered stoplights, and every person you passed waved whether they knew you or not, and most of them did know you, or would by next Sunday. It was dry and dusty, but the air smelled like earth and sweet hay, and when the wind blew just right, it carried the sound of cows lowing like some distant sleepy lullaby. My dad, Daniel, had been a farmer all his life. Dirt under his nails was just another part of him, like the lines on his weathered face or the permanent tan on his neck. He fit in with the other men of the town instantly, but no one fit quite like he did with Rocky Thompson. Rocky was in his mid-50s but moved like a man 20 years younger. He wore the same threadbare overalls every day, always with one strap undone and a dust-covered cap that never seemed to leave his head. His boots were practically fossilized, but he'd still beat you in a foot race across a field. And that man could work. Harder than anyone I'd ever met. He wasn't flashy, didn't talk much unless he had something worth saying. But he was the kind of guy who'd show up at 4 a.m. to help you fix your busted tractor and still be there at dinner with a pie he didn't make but pretended he did. Everyone in Fairmill knew him. Most folks liked him. A few owed him. My dad? He loved him like a brother. They became partners fast. First at the dairy, then later, when the dairy shut down, they started their own wild game processing business, Thompson and Rayner Game Works. It was a hit in a town where deer season was more sacred than Sunday service. Their bond was something else. I'd see them out in the fields, leaning against the bed of a truck, sharing a thermos of burnt black coffee, laughing about something only they understood. They had that quiet friendship, the kind that doesn't need constant words to mean something deep. But all that came crashing down on a Tuesday afternoon. My stepmom, her name's Angela, was an EMT. Every week she stopped by Rocky's place to refill his weekly pill organizer, just part of the routine. He'd had some minor heart stuff years back, but he always brushed it off. That day, she let herself in like always. She found him on the floor of the kitchen, clutching his chest. She tried, God did she try, CPR, radioed in backup, the whole 9 yards. But Rocky was already gone. The funeral was like something out of a Southern Gothic novel. It was held at the Fairmill Baptist Church, the only one in town big enough to hold everyone who came. They came in droves, old football buddies, hunting friends, church folks, and every last farmer within 100 miles. The air was thick with heat and grief. My dad sat stiff in the front pew, face unreadable except for his hands, clenched tight in his lap. I'd never seen him cry. Not even when we buried my grandmother. But that day, when they carried Rocky's coffin out under the hot sun, something inside him broke. Silent tears ran down his face, and for a moment, he looked older than I'd ever seen him. After that, things started falling apart. Rocky's family, people we'd never even heard of, started showing up, asking questions about land, equipment, money. There were arguments, legal threats, tension in town, business dried up. My dad tried to hold it all together, but you could see it wearing on him. The life in his eyes dimmed. The mornings came slower. The laughter stopped. Then, about 6 weeks after the funeral, I had the dream. It wasn't like other dreams. I wasn't in it, not in the usual way. I wasn't talking or walking or acting. I was just watching. The scene was vivid, more real than reality itself. A wide open field, golden wheat swaying in the breeze under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The kind of place that only exists in photographs or memories. And there he was, Rocky. But not as I remembered him. He looked young, maybe 30. His blonde hair was thick and sun-kissed, no cap. He wore a clean blue shirt, buttoned all the way up, tucked into fresh jeans. His boots looked new. He was leaning against a wooden fence post, one hand resting on it like he'd just finished building it. There was no sound but the wind, and yet I heard him, or maybe just understood him. "I'm okay," he said. "I made it. I'm home." Then he smiled, turned to look at the field, and faded into it like smoke on the wind. I woke up with wet cheeks and a strange sense of peace. But I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. A year passed. We were out at my dad's place, sitting under the old pecan tree behind the house, drinking iced tea and watching the sky go purple with dusk. The cicadas screamed like always. We were swapping stories, mostly about Rocky, because that's what we did now. Something in me said it was time. So I told him, every detail. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at the distance like he was trying to picture it. Then he looked at me, real slow, and said, "I never had a dream like that." I nodded. I think Rocky came to me because he knew I'd wait until you needed to hear it. Dad took a long breath. His hand trembled when he wiped his eyes. He always did know what I needed before I did. I don't claim to understand what happened. I'm not into ghosts or signs or anything like that. But that dream, it wasn't a dream. I know that deep in my bones. It didn't happen to scare me. It didn't happen to start something. It happened to end something, to close the wound, to say goodbye. Years have passed since then. Dad's back to working the land, slower now, but steady. The game plant eventually shut down, but he doesn't mind. Says the pace suits him better. He kept Rocky's cap, hung it over the corner of his shop's doorway. It's dusty, sun-bleached, and fraying at the edges. Every now and then, when the wheat's high and the wind's just right, I swear I can smell that faint dusty scent, like overalls and old boots and something stronger, memory. Rocky never came back in a dream. Just that once. But once was enough. Because now, when my dad and I talk about him, there's sadness. But there's also peace. Not everything broken can be fixed, but sometimes it just needs to be let go. And in a small town, with quiet fields and golden wheat, that's enough. That's home. I was 15 the spring it happened and living in the kind of town where nothing ever really does. That's not an exaggeration. Gallows Hill, Nebraska had a population of 872 the last time I checked, and that was back in 1998. It might be less now. The kind of place where folks still leave their doors unlocked and where the church bulletin gets passed around like it's breaking news. One main road split the town in half, with a gas station, 2 diners, and a grocery store that hadn't changed its layout since before I was born. Entertainment? Forget it. No movie theater, no arcade, no mall within 40 miles. We didn't have cable until I was 10. The internet came in later, but we were too broke to afford it. As an only child, I relied on my friends for fun, when I could find them. Luckily, I had 2 solid ones, Leo Madsen and Tara Doyle. We were all in the same grade and lived on the same stretch of Birchwood Avenue, a winding road just outside the town's tiny center. Leo and I had known each other since we were toddlers. His mom ran the daycare and our families were close. Tara had moved to town in 8th grade from somewhere in Iowa. She was tough, quick-witted, and didn't seem to care that most of the girls didn't like her. She clicked with us immediately. We spent our weekends hiking the trails behind Leo's house, cutting across the woods and exploring the old grasslands that stretched out for miles. We liked the outdoors. We had to. It was early April, still a little chilly in the mornings, but warm enough to be outside in a hoodie. I remembered the date exactly. April 11th, 1998. A Saturday. My dad had already gone into town to pick up parts for his truck, and my mom was on the phone with my aunt. Leo showed up on my porch around 9 a.m., wearing a beanie and his old Letterman jacket that had belonged to his older brother. "You ready?" he asked, not even bothering to say what for. "Yeah." "Let me grab my bag," I said. We didn't plan much back then. We didn't need to. We'd usually just head out and figure it out along the way. I stuffed a football, a pocket knife, and a bottle of water into my backpack. Then we walked down the street to Tara's house. She was already on her porch, arms crossed, wearing combat boots and a hoodie with the sleeves pushed up. "Finally," she said, grabbing her own bag and joining us without another word. We followed the usual trail into the woods behind Leo's place. The ground was soft from rain earlier in the week, but not muddy. After about 40 minutes of hiking, we reached the edge of the forest and came out onto a wide expanse of grassland, tall, gold-tipped grass swaying in the wind. Usually we stuck to familiar spots, but that day we decided to take a different path. Leo had seen something in the distance, an open patch near a small cluster of trees. "Let's check it out," he said. We weaved through the grass until we found it, a clearing big enough to toss the football around. We dropped our bags and started messing around. Nothing serious, just passing the ball, taking turns running long. Tara always had the best spiral. We were halfway through a game when Leo chucked the ball way too hard. It sailed over my head and vanished into the tall grass. "Nice one, Joe Montana," I muttered and jogged after it. I pushed through the waist-high blades, scanning for the ball, when I spotted something else, a flash of dull red metal just beyond the grass line. At first, I thought it was a tractor or an old water tank, but the shape didn't fit. I moved closer. It was a station wagon, partly covered in dry grass and leaves. The red paint was sun-faded, and there was fake wood paneling along the sides, real retro-looking, even for '98. The windshield was cracked, and vines curled around the side mirrors. "Hey," I called. "Come here." Leo and Tara jogged over and froze when they saw the car. "Whoa," Leo said. "How the hell did that get out here?" Tara circled the vehicle slowly. "No way this just got dumped here. There's no road, no tire tracks." "Think it's locked?" I asked. I reached for the front passenger door handle and gave it a pull. It stuck at first, but then creaked open. Dust swirled in the air. "No way," Leo grinned. Tara shrugged. "Might as well sit down, better than the grass." She climbed into the driver's seat. Leo took the back. I sat in the front passenger seat and stared at the dash. It was dusty, sure, but intact. There was still a pair of fuzzy dice hanging from the mirror. We stayed there for maybe an hour, talking, laughing, making up stories about how the car got there. Leo joked it was used in a heist. Tara said it was probably a makeout spot some teens forgot. When the wind picked up and we started getting hungry, we decided to head back. "Let's not tell anyone," Tara said. "This can be our secret spot." We all nodded. It felt cool, like we'd found something ours. The next morning it started to rain. Leo still showed up at my door, and we decided to go anyway. Tara met us at the edge of the woods, already soaked. "Still want to go?" she asked. "Why not?" Leo said. "We're almost there." We sprinted through the trees, laughing and slipping on wet leaves. When we got to the car, the rain turned heavy. We ducked inside. I took the back seat this time. Leo was in the driver's seat, and Tara beside him. For a while, we just sat there, letting the rain hit the roof. The sound was oddly peaceful. Then, as I stretched out, my foot hit something soft under the seat. I leaned down and pushed aside an old fast food wrapper. There was a clump of brown hair. I froze. At first I thought maybe it was animal fur, but it wasn't. It was too fine. Too human. I reached over and touched the edge of the back seat where I noticed something else. A clean slit, like from a knife. It had been patched over slightly, but the stitching was poor. I tapped Leo's shoulder. "Hey," I said, "we need to go." He chuckled, thinking I was joking. Tara turned back, frowning. "Why?" "I'll tell you outside," I said. They hesitated but followed me out. We stood under the trees, soaked to the bone. "There's hair under the seat," I said quietly. "And a cut in the fabric, like someone hid something there. I think this car was part of something bad." Tara's face turned pale. Leo's smile vanished. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Pretty sure." We started walking back in silence. The rain soaked through our clothes. By the time we got back to town, the sky was clearing and the sun peeked out. "I'll tell my parents," I said. "You guys don't have to." I went straight to my dad. Told him everything, well, almost. I left out that we found it the day before. I didn't want to get in trouble. He raised an eyebrow but didn't say much. He just nodded and said, "I'll call the sheriff. Probably just an old abandoned car, but I'll let them check it out." Later that afternoon, Sheriff Howard came by and asked me to show him where it was. I gave him rough directions. He thanked me and said they'd send someone out. That night I was at Leo's again. Tara came by too. We were in the basement playing cards when Leo's mom came down. "The sheriff's here," she said. We looked at each other. Upstairs, Sheriff Howard stood in the doorway with a grim look. "They found something," he said. "Not just the car. A body, or what's left of one. I felt my stomach turn. My hands started to shake. Tara sat down immediately. Leo didn't say a word. "We're gonna need you kids to come down to the station tomorrow, just to go over everything again." We nodded. Our parents came to pick us up. I didn't sleep that night. For the next 5 weeks, the whole town buzzed with rumors. People stopped going into the woods. Kids weren't allowed out past dusk. Eventually, we found out more. The car had been registered to a man from Colorado, someone who went missing in 1995. His family had reported him missing, but there were no leads. Dental records confirmed the remains were his. He'd been killed. Blunt force trauma. His wallet and ID were found buried under the driver's seat. Whoever did it hadn't tried that hard to hide it, but the case never got solved. No DNA. No fingerprints, no weapon. Just a car and a body hidden in the grass for 3 years. We talked to police 2 more times, but they never seemed suspicious of us. We were just unlucky kids who stumbled on something awful. Tara moved the next year. Her dad got a job in Missouri. We kept in touch for a while, but life pulled us in different directions. Leo still lives in Gallows Hill. He manages the local hardware store. We meet for coffee sometimes, and the topic always comes back to that car. "We shouldn't have gone back the second day," he told me once. "We got lucky." He's right. That car had been sitting there, hidden in the grasslands, waiting. And I still think about the person who left it there. How close they might have lived. How often they might have walked through town like the rest of us. And how they got away with it. I had never lived in the countryside before the fall I turned 16. Up until that point, I had always been a city kid. Crowded streets, apartment buildings stacked like concrete bookshelves, the distant hum of traffic that never really stopped. But after a string of burglaries near our building and a break-in at the store my dad managed, my parents decided they'd had enough. They sold what little we had, packed up everything, and moved us to Iron Creek, a small town in southern Montana that barely showed up on a map. It felt like the end of the world. Population? Maybe 10,000 if you included the outlying farms. There was one grocery store, one gas station, and one school that combined grades 7 through 12. Our house was a modest one-story place near the town center, not far from the school. You could walk the entire town in under 30 minutes. Everyone knew everyone, and they all noticed when someone new showed up, especially someone like me, quiet, awkward, and from the city. I was enrolled at Iron Creek High within a week of us moving. My first day was uncomfortable, not just the usual new kid nerves, worse. My homeroom teacher, Mrs. Platt, a woman with the energy of a midday church volunteer, made me stand at the front of the room and introduce myself. I could feel the weight of every single eye on me. "I'm Ivy. We just moved here. From Denver." That's all I managed to get out before my throat closed up. I could hear a few people whispering. One girl giggled. It wasn't even mean, just casual, like I was a dog doing something funny. But it stung. By lunch, I was sitting by myself at the corner table near the vending machines, pretending to scroll through non-existent texts on my phone. It went on like that for the next couple of weeks. I tried saying hi to a few girls, but they always seemed to close ranks before I got more than 2 words out. I wore the wrong shoes, used the wrong slang, didn't know their inside jokes. Eventually, I just stopped trying. That's when I met Logan. It was in our 4th period art class, which I'd picked just to fill my schedule. I wasn't good at art, but it was better than gym. Logan sat 2 seats away from me and always brought this old sketch pad that looked like it had been through a war. Every day he'd sit and quietly draw, never talking to anyone, not even the teacher. One day he caught me glancing over at his sketch pad. He didn't say anything, just turned the page so I could see better. It was a pencil drawing of a tree, but not like any I'd ever seen. It had faces hidden in the bark, dozens of them, and shadowy figures that blended into the background like ghosts trapped inside. "That's really good," I said before I could stop myself. Logan looked up at me. His eyes were the strange shade of gray like smoke. Thanks. Most people just think it's creepy. I mean, it is, but in a good way. He smiled just slightly. You're not from here, right? Nope, Denver. Big change. Yeah, I don't really fit in. I get that. That was how it started. We didn't talk much at first, just small comments during class, but it was something. After a while, he started sitting with me at lunch. He introduced me to his only two friends, Tyler and Reed. Both were quiet, older than us, and into heavy metal and weird indie films I'd never heard of. I didn't really click with them, but I appreciated not eating alone anymore. Logan was different, though. He was always calm. Mysterious, maybe. Like someone who saw the world from a slightly different angle. I started to feel safer around him than anyone else at that school. Which is probably why I said yes when he invited me to his house one Friday. We were sitting in the courtyard after lunch when he asked. "My parents are out this weekend," he said, tossing a pebble between his fingers. "You should come by. I've got a bunch of old horror movies. Stuff you can't stream." I hesitated. "Where do you live?" "Just outside of town, like 40 minutes. Real quiet. Farm Road." I wasn't sure, but then again, nobody else had invited me to anything since we'd moved. I was tired of being the outsider. "Okay, that could be fun." He smiled. "Cool. I'll pick you up after school." I told my mom it was a movie night with a new friend and that his parents would be home. That was a lie, but I didn't want her to say no. She agreed reluctantly and told me to call if I needed anything. I didn't mention that there probably wouldn't be reception out there. Logan's truck looked like something out of a 90s movie, an old blue Chevy with rust eating the edges. As we drove, the town gave way to open fields and dust roads. I lost reception 10 minutes in. "Just so you know," he said casually, "we're off-grid out here. No neighbors, no cell towers, no drama." "Great," I said, laughing nervously. "Sounds like horror movie 101. He smirked. "Yeah, but you've got me. I'm the harmless type." I smiled back, but something about the way he said it stuck with me. His house was a faded ranch-style home, surrounded by tall grass and abandoned farming equipment. It looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. There were 3 other vehicles parked on the side of the gravel driveway. None of them looked like they ran. Inside, the place was surprisingly clean. Dark wood furniture, worn but organized. No pets, no signs of other people. "Where are your parents again?" I asked as I followed him into the living room. "Out in Spokane visiting my aunt. My brother was supposed to come, but he bailed." "You live out here year-round?" "Yeah. My dad's a welder. Mom works in town. I like the quiet." We watched a movie, some old slasher flick I'd never seen, and made small talk. But as the sky darkened, I started to get this creeping sense of unease. Something wasn't right. The way Logan kept glancing at his phone even though it didn't have signal. The way he closed the curtains all at once. The way he locked the front door even though we were alone and miles from the nearest neighbor. At one point, he went to the bathroom, and I was left alone in the living room. I don't know what came over me. Curiosity, maybe. But I stood up and wandered down the hall toward the bedrooms. The first door I opened was his. Basic, unmade bed, posters, sketchbooks everywhere. I peeked inside his dresser. 3rd drawer down, there was a handgun. Not a toy, not a replica. Real. I shut the drawer and stepped back, my heart pounding. A sound made me jump, floorboards creaking. I turned, expecting Logan. Nothing. But the door at the end of the hall was slightly open. I walked toward it, unsure why. Maybe I thought it was a spare room. Maybe I wanted to confirm everything was okay. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, like meat left out in the sun, rotting, wet. Then I saw the feet. A man's body, face down, half covered by a blanket. There was a dark patch on the carpet near his head. I saw a photo frame on the nightstand. 2 boys, one of them clearly Logan, the other older. That had to be his brother. Dead. I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring, unable to believe what I was seeing. And then I heard Logan's voice behind me. "You weren't supposed to go in there." I turned around slowly. He was standing at the end of the hall, eyes wide, breathing hard. He looked sad, angry, empty. "Ivy, I didn't want you to see that." "What happened?" My voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to. He came home drunk, started yelling again. I snapped. I stepped back, slowly. "You have to take me home," I said. "Now." He shook his head. "I can't. Logan, I need time to figure this out. If you leave, you'll tell someone. I know you will." "I won't," I lied. "I swear." He looked down, then back up. "I don't want to hurt you." "Then don't. Just let me go, please." He didn't move. I bolted. I ran through the living room, unlocked the door, and burst outside into the darkness. I didn't hear him chasing me, but I didn't stop. I ran down the gravel road until my lungs burned. Finally, I stopped and pulled out my phone. One bar. I called my mom. She answered on the third ring, panicked. I sobbed and told her to come. I gave as many landmarks as I could. 20 minutes later, headlights appeared on the road. I've never been so relieved to see her. I didn't tell her everything right away, just that I didn't feel safe, that something had happened. She called the police. Logan was arrested that night without resistance. They found his brother's body and the gun. Later, they discovered drawings, disturbing ones, showing scenes that looked eerily similar to what had happened. Some had names written under them. One of them was mine. I never went back to Iron Creek High. We moved again, this time without saying goodbye to anyone. I still think about that night, about how close I came, about what might have happened if I hadn't looked in that room. There are monsters in small towns too. They just hide better. And sometimes they draw you pictures first. I was 16 when we moved to Briar Hollow, a tiny village in the Piedmont region of North Carolina. If you looked it up on a map, you'd probably miss it. Just a dot surrounded by woods, narrow roads, and long silences. My mom said we came out there for a fresh start. Truth was, things had gotten messy after the divorce. She wanted peace. I think I just wanted to disappear. Briar Hollow didn't have a high school of its own. Every morning, I took a 40-minute bus ride to a consolidated school in the next town over, Averton. The ride was bumpy and awkward, filled with students who'd known each other since birth. No one ever sat next to me, not unless they had to. But somehow, I found two people who made things bearable, Clara and Reese Morgan. They lived near the edge of Averton, but were often around Briar Hollow because their grandparents owned land there. Reese was adopted when they were both really young, but they were in the same grade. I remember the first time I met them, Clara was skipping rocks at the edge of the little lake near the fire station, and Reese was climbing the rusted-out windmill behind it. I was walking alone and stopped when Clara asked if I wanted to try skipping rocks too. From then on, we stuck together. None of us had other close friends. We were the kind of kids who sat at the edge of the cafeteria, shared earbuds on the bus, and spent weekends wandering trails with no names. I had a quiet crush on Clara for months, the kind that never goes anywhere because you're scared to ruin what little you've got. I think she knew, but she never said anything, and I didn't either. It was late September the day it happened, a Saturday. The air smelled like damp leaves and cold pine. We met outside my place around 10 a.m., each of us carrying our own bags with water, snacks, and whatever junk we thought we might need. "Where are we going this time?" Clara asked, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She was wearing her brother's oversized hoodie and cargo pants. "Back behind Harper's Trail," I said. "I found a side path last week while walking Molly. It cuts left down past the ridge." Reese raised an eyebrow. "That's where the land dips into the ravine, right? You sure we're not going to get lost?" "We've got Google Maps," I said, patting my phone. And besides, we've got 3 sandwiches, 2 granola bars, and a bag of sour gummies. We'll survive." Clara laughed. "If we die, I'm haunting you first." We walked for about 30 minutes before reaching the trailhead. The regular path looked the same as always. Worn dirt, patches of moss, boot prints. But halfway down, we took the side path I'd found. It narrowed quickly, trees closing in around us like arms folding inward. "This looks cozy," Reese muttered. "Don't be such a chicken," Clara teased. The woods in Briar Hollow were different from the ones in Averton. Quieter, denser. Sometimes it felt like the trees were listening. I know that sounds dumb, but when you grow up out here, you notice things others don't. We followed the narrow path until we reached a creek, one that didn't show up on any local maps. The water was shallow and clear, weaving through rocks and fallen branches like it was tracing something old. "Let's follow it," Clara said. "It has to lead somewhere." "Somewhere like a dead raccoon," Reese muttered, but followed anyway. We walked for nearly an hour. The deeper we went, the more the forest changed. It got quieter. The chirping birds disappeared. The breeze stopped. And then we saw it. There was a structure, just barely visible through the trees. A roof, slate tiles, moss-covered. Clara paused. "Is that a house?" "No way," I said, confused. "There's nothing out here. Nobody lives this deep in." Reese looked uncertain. "We should turn back, seriously." "You can wait here if you want," Clara said. "We'll go check it out real quick." "I'm not standing here alone, are you kidding me?" We approached the house together. No trail led to it. It just sat there like it had been dropped from the sky, like the forest had grown around it. The place was collapsing in on itself. Siding peeled away like old skin, and most of the windows were either broken or covered with mold. The front door hung crooked, open just enough to invite trouble. Something about it made my stomach twist. "You guys feel that?" I asked quietly. Clara nodded. "Yeah, it feels heavy." Reese whispered, "We should go." But Clara had already stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned under her weight. "Just 5 minutes," she said. I followed. Of course I did. Inside, the smell hit us first. It was like rot and mildew and something else. Something that made the back of my throat tighten. The walls were stained yellow, waterlogged. Trash and broken furniture were everywhere. "Someone's been here," Clara said, pointing at an empty can of beans on the floor. We tiptoed through the living room, then past a crumbling kitchen. The whole place felt like it had been frozen in time and then left to rot. That's when we heard it. Footsteps upstairs. All 3 of us froze. I looked at Clara. Her face was pale. She mouthed, "Go." But before we could move, we saw him. He appeared at the top of the stairs like a shadow taking form. An old man, gaunt, clothes hanging off his thin frame like rags. His hair was wild, eyes sunken. "Get out!" he shouted, voice hoarse like it hadn't been used in years. We all screamed. We ran. Clara was ahead of me, and I could hear Reese stumbling behind. But as I reached the doorway, I felt a hand clamp around my arm. "No!" I yelled, twisting hard. "Isaac!" Clara turned back and grabbed my other arm, pulling. Reese joined in. The man's nails dug into my skin, but I yanked free. We ran like hell, crashing through the trees, ignoring branches slicing our skin. When we finally stopped panting, I looked at Clara. Her lip trembled. "He had a knife." "I didn't see it," I whispered. "I did." We eventually found our way back to the creek. Reese was shaking. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. We didn't say much on the walk home. When we got back, my mom was furious. But when I told her everything, she went quiet and called the sheriff. 2 deputies came by the next day. A week later, one of them called to say they found the house. But it was empty, abandoned. The door was nailed shut when they arrived. They said there were signs someone had been living there. A mattress, food wrappers, feces in the corner. But no sign of the man we saw. They said it was probably a drifter. But I remembered his face. That rage, that strength. He didn't feel like a drifter. Years passed. Clara went to college. Reese moved to Charlotte. I stayed around helping my mom after she got sick. We didn't talk about that day much, but one summer, when we were all back in town for Clara's grandfather's funeral, we decided to go back. "I want to see if it's still there," Clara said. "I need to know it was real." We didn't go through the woods this time. I found an old survey map that listed a maintenance road not far from the site. We took my truck and drove out there. When we reached the spot, our hearts dropped. The house was gone. In its place was an overgrown lot, fenced in by a tall wire barrier. No sign of construction, no foundation, just dirt and weeds. We got out and walked to the fence. Someone had spray painted a warning on one of the fence posts. "Do not return." Clara turned to me and said, "He's gone." "Right?" I nodded. "He has to be." But I didn't believe it. And sometimes, late at night, when I drive past the tree line behind Harper's Trail, I feel it again. That heaviness. That silence. The forest hasn't forgotten. And I haven't either. It was late September in 1996 when everything changed for me. I was 13 years old, living in a small town called Renford, tucked along the edge of the Midlands. It wasn't a village, not quite a proper city either, just one of those forgotten in-between places with crumbling brickwork, shuttered pubs, and the smell of damp clinging to every street corner. My mom and I had moved there a year earlier after my dad walked out. She worked long hours at the textile warehouse on the outskirts, and I spent most of my time wandering the narrow back streets, trying to find something, anything, to break up the monotony. Renford was the kind of place where nothing ever happened, the kind of place where people grew up, grew old, and then disappeared without much fuss. We had a faded shopping precinct called The Rose, built sometime in the 70s over the remains of old mills. It was concrete, ugly, but it had a bakery, a chemist, and a discount shop, so people still went. Right at the heart of it sat a sunken plaza, circular, with steep stone steps surrounding it. The locals called it the Nest. No one really knew why. Maybe because of the way the birds gathered there, always circling, always watching. That's where this happened. That's where I saw something I'll never unsee. It was a Saturday. Mom had just finished her shift at the warehouse. We didn't have much money, so weekends usually meant a shared pastry from Penny's Bakehouse and a wander through the market stalls. That day we got our usual cheese and onion slice and sat in the Nest like we always did. The sky was heavy with cloud, that flat gray kind of sky that feels like it's pressing down on your head. Mom was rubbing her ankles. She wore those beige tights that always seemed a size too small, and they'd leave red welts on her legs. "Bloody boots have been pinching me all day," she muttered, grimacing. "You should just get new ones," I said. "With what money, sweetheart?" "Wish I could." We shared a little laugh, the kind you make when you're trying to ignore everything else. That's when we noticed him. He was lying flat on his back, right on the pedestal in the middle of the Nest. A man we'd seen a dozen times before. Everyone had. His name was Paulie, or at least that's what people called him. No one knew where he lived, if he even had a place. He was always around, though, muttering to himself, asking for spare change, sometimes yelling at pigeons. But he was harmless, just part of the scenery. That day, he was especially still. One arm flopped over his chest, the other dangling down beside the stone ledge. His beard was thick, crusted with crumbs and old ash, and his coat looked soaked through, even though it hadn't rained in a week. "Has he moved?" Mom asked, squinting. "I don't know. He's probably sleeping." "Been there long?" "I think so. I saw him when we walked in." People were whispering, not loud, just murmurs carried on the wind. A few teenagers across the plaza glanced his way. An old man with a cane made a wide circle to avoid getting too close. Still, no one did anything. It was the birds that noticed first. A single magpie landed beside him. Then another. A third one perched on the ledge of the fountain. At first I thought nothing of it. Magpies were always around. Renford had thousands of them. 3 for a girl, Mum said absently, watching them. What? Magpies. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy. Don't you know the rhyme? I didn't answer. I was watching the birds now, the way their heads cocked to one side, how their little black eyes fixated on Polly like he was a pile of spilled chips. Then one of them hopped forward and pecked at his cheek. Did you see that? I said, voice rising. Mum squinted. Probably just picking a scab. You know how filthy he always looked. Another peck, then another. More magpies began arriving. 5, maybe 6. One pecked hard enough to make Polly's head jerk. That's not right, Mum said under her breath. That's not right at all. It's strange what keeps people frozen. We were surrounded by shoppers, families, kids. No one moved. No one rushed forward. It was like some invisible force had wrapped its fingers around our throats and told us to wait. A shrill cry rang out when a magpie tore a strip of flesh from Polly's cheek. Then the silence broke. Screams, shouts. Someone yelled for help. A man in a blue jumper ran up the steps and stumbled back down. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Christ, he kept saying over and over. We couldn't look away. I remember that very clearly. My eyes locked on Polly as more birds came. 10, 15. They descended like they'd been waiting their whole lives for this moment. His face wasn't a face anymore. It was red, raw. Strings of wet tissue clung to his beard. His lips were gone. One eye had vanished. He didn't flinch. He hadn't moved. Not once. I think he's dead, I whispered. Mum looked sick. Get up. Now we're leaving. We ran up the steps. I turned just once before we got to the street. 2 boys had climbed over the edge to try to scare the birds away. One slipped. The other just stood there frozen, staring down at the horror that used to be Polly. We didn't have mobile phones. No one did back then. Someone ran into the chemist and told the cashier to call the police. Others went looking for a copper. Back then, there were still a few on foot patrol. A young officer showed up maybe 10 minutes later. He was fresh-faced, barely older than my brother. He took one look, turned green, and ran to the bin to vomit. Then he radioed it in. More officers came, an ambulance, then a coroner's van. They threw a tarp over the body, but it was too late. Everyone had already seen. Everyone knew. Polly was dead, and the birds had eaten him. Later, there were questions, lots of them. The police tried to determine the time of death. Turns out, Polly had been there since early morning. They think he died during the night, maybe of exposure or a heart attack. His body had just laid there motionless, for hours and hours while people walked past. The magpies must have been watching, waiting. Some reports said the birds were drawn to the scent of death. Others claimed something about chemical changes in the body that make carrion birds react. But the truth is, no one really explained it. No one wanted to. There wasn't a funeral. Or if there was, no one knew about it. The council cleaned the steps, painted over the dark stains, added a plaque with flowers for a few weeks before it was vandalized and taken down. But that pedestal in the middle of the nest, no one sits there anymore. Years went by. I moved out of Renford the second I turned 18, got a job in Nottingham, a family, tried to forget. But even now, every time I hear the flutter of wings or catch a glimpse of black and white feathers in the corner of my eye, I remember. I remember Polly's stillness. I remember the sound of beaks hitting bone. I remember that we all watched and no one helped. Not because we didn't care, but because we didn't want to get close. Because he smelled. Because he didn't matter. That's the real horror of it. I went back to Renford last year, almost 3 decades later. The nest is still there, but the pedestal's been removed. Just a flat patch of concrete now. And yet, there were 4 magpies perched along the edge when I passed. One looked right at me. Didn't move. Didn't blink. And for the first time in 29 years, I wondered, What if Polly wasn't dead when they started? What if the birds knew something we didn't? What if he had lain there, paralyzed or barely conscious, feeling everything as those sharp little beaks tore him apart? I'll never know. But I never sit on those steps again. And if you ever see a magpie land on someone you assume is asleep, they're not asleep. I was 10 years old when it happened. The year was 1997. My name's Colin, and I grew up in a town called Maple Springs, a quiet patch of suburbia tucked into the southern corner of Illinois, the kind of place where the biggest events in the paper were the fall parade or the high school football scores. There were no chain stores back then. We had Joe's Grocery, Bailey's Diner, and a gas station with a mechanical pump you had to flip on manually. My dad worked for the electric co-op and my mom was a school secretary. People waved to each other. Front doors stayed unlocked. If someone's dog ran loose, the neighbors helped find it. We weren't special. Just quiet. Predictable. That's what made what happened so much harder to accept. It started with the house next door. The Hoffmans moved into the house beside ours in the spring of '95. Carol and Dennis. They were in their mid-40s, no kids, just the two of them and their dog, an older beagle named Buster. My mom brought over a banana bread the week they moved in, and I remember Carol standing on the porch in denim overalls and a white t-shirt, smiling like she didn't know what to do with the kindness. Dennis was quiet. He had a smoker's voice, and I rarely saw him without a cigarette. He worked nights somewhere, maybe maintenance or shipping. My dad said he didn't talk much, but was polite. Carol was the more outgoing of the two. She tended to her garden religiously, talked to my mom over the fence while hanging laundry, and always gave me peppermints when I brought her mail by mistake. But even though they were pleasant, they mostly kept to themselves. No BBQs, no town events, no church. At 10, I didn't think much of it. People are just different, but it always felt like there was a curtain around them. And then, one day, they were just gone. It was the start of October. The leaves had just started to turn that fiery kind of red-orange that made every front yard look like a postcard. I'd been outside tossing a football with my friend Lucas when I realized Buster hadn't barked in a few days. Buster barked all the time. That's what made me notice first. Not the people. The silence. I mentioned it to my mom that night while she was making chili. "Hey Mom, have you seen Mrs. Hoffman lately?" Now that you mention it, no, not for a few days. The next morning my dad checked and noticed their car was still in the driveway. A dull blue Ford Taurus. It hadn't moved. By day 3, Mom tried calling them. No answer. Day 4, she knocked on their door. Nothing. By day 5, she called the police. The officers came the same afternoon. I remember them walking around the house, knocking on the doors, peeking into windows. Eventually, they forced their way in through the back. They came out with Buster. The poor dog looked thin, scared, and was covered in his own mess. But he was alive. They gave him water and called animal control. That's when things got weird. The house was locked from the inside, no sign of struggle, no blood, no notes, no packed bags. The Hoffmans were just gone. The news hit our town like a punch to the throat. I remember sitting in class and hearing my teacher whisper to another teacher in the hallway. My parents wouldn't let me play outside after dark. For the first time in my life, our front door was locked at night. Maybe they left in the middle of the night, one neighbor said. With no car? Another replied. People don't just vanish, someone else muttered. Rumors filled the vacuum. Some said Carol had a brother in Indiana, and maybe they ran off to escape something. Others said Dennis had gambling debts. A few whispered about domestic abuse, that maybe one had killed the other and fled. The wildest theory came from Lucas, who claimed they were government spies who'd been taken out in a silent op. Even at 10, I didn't buy that. But the truth is, nobody knew anything. The house sat empty for years. No one moved in. No one mowed the lawn. Sometimes the police would show up again, do another search or follow some tip, but nothing ever came of it. Buster was adopted by the Walsh family on the corner. He was old, but still friendly, and he'd still wander over to our yard sometimes like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I didn't feel safe anymore. The town didn't feel real anymore. My parents were never the same. They used to talk to neighbors freely, leave windows open at night, let me walk to the corner store alone. That stopped. We all became a little more afraid. I moved away at 18, college, then work, then marriage. But every year I'd visit my folks, still in that same house. And every year I'd glance over at that empty shell of a home next door and feel my stomach twist. The siding peeled. The shutters sagged. Grass grew through the cracks in the driveway. But worse than all that was the silence. One summer when I was 27, I got drunk with some old school friends, Lucas included. "You still think about the Hoffmans?" I asked. Lucas went quiet. His buzz faded fast. "Yeah," he finally said. "I drive by sometimes, just to see if anything's changed, but it never does." Then, 2 winters ago, it happened. My dad called me around 9:30 p.m., voice tight. "They're digging in the Hoffman's yard," he said. "What?" "Police. Lights everywhere. They brought cadaver dogs." I drove down that weekend. The yard was roped off. Neighbors stood in clumps watching. The police said it was an ongoing investigation. Word spread fast that someone had come forward. A man. Said he used to work with Dennis. That he knew something but had been scared for years. They found something, but we were never told what. Rumor was, it was bone fragments, in the back corner of the yard under what used to be a compost pile. Nothing confirmed, no arrests. But something shifted after that. People started talking again, quietly, nervously. The truth is, we may never know what happened to Carol and Dennis Hoffman. Maybe he killed her and ran, maybe someone else did. Maybe they were taken. Maybe it was something darker, something buried under years of small-town silence. But their disappearance tore a hole in the fabric of our town, and in me. It was the first time I ever understood that the world wasn't fair, that things don't always make sense, that sometimes people vanish, and nothing ever brings them back. That fear never left me, not when I lock my doors at night, not when I walk past a quiet house with blinds always shut, not when I hear a dog barking next door, then silence. A few months ago, my parents sold the house, downsized to a place in Springfield. Before they left, I stood on their old porch one last time and looked at the Hoffman house, still empty, still peeling. But now, behind it, a patch of earth had been dug up and recovered, marked only by fresh grass. I stared at it, and for a moment, I thought I saw Buster's tail wagging in the corner of my vision, but it was just the wind, and then I left. But I'll never stop wondering, because in towns like Maple Springs, where nothing ever happens, when something finally does, it never really goes away. It started on an idle Tuesday, the kind that slips through your life unnoticed unless something extraordinary happens. And for me, it did. I was 22, living in a small town called Ridge Hollow in upstate New York. Not the quaint postcard version you'd see on a tourism site, but the kind of place where the gas station doubles as a grocery store and folks eye you from their porch just for walking past too slow. I was still living at home back then. My older brother, Ryan, had recently gotten his first car, a beat-up '99 Civic with a loud muffler and a stubborn passenger door. He worked construction jobs in the next county, and sometimes I'd tag along if I needed a ride to town or just wanted to get out of the house for a bit. That day was no different. It was late summer, mid-August. The air was heavy, thick with heat and the promise of a thunderstorm that hadn't come. Ryan needed to fill up on gas, and we'd just driven through Oak Ridge, an area locals avoided if they had the choice. It wasn't dangerous exactly, but it had a reputation. Lots of loitering, rough-looking folks, too many cars parked in the same spot for too long. My mom used to call it, that corner where you mind your business. We pulled into a rundown Gulf station on the edge of Oak Ridge around 5 p.m. "I'm going in to pay," Ryan said, slapping the car into park. You want anything? I shook my head. Nah, I'm good, gonna have a smoke. He nodded and got out. As he walked inside, I lit my cigarette and leaned against the car, my eyes darting over the lot. Ryan, ever paranoid about car theft since his window got smashed the year before, had locked the doors behind him. It wasn't something I thought much of at the time. We always locked our doors. The sky was dimming just slightly, a gray sheet sliding in above the sun. The gas station had 4 pumps and only one other car, a dusty green sedan, sat across from us. The driver, a man in his 40s maybe, had one foot propped on the inside sill of his door and was fiddling with something on his dashboard. I wasn't paying attention to him until he got out and crossed the narrow gap between our cars. "Excuse me," he said, standing maybe 5 feet away. I turned, uneasy already. His clothes were plain, loose jeans, white shirt, scuffed sneakers. But something about him was off. He wasn't aggressive, wasn't smiling either. He had this detached calm in his eyes. "Yeah?" I asked, flicking ash to the pavement. "Think you could help me with something real quick?" he asked. "Nothing big. Just need you to put your foot on the gas for a second. Something's acting weird, and I want to check if it's the pedal or the line." I stared at him. The cigarette felt awkward in my fingers. My stomach flipped. I don't think so," I said, already shifting closer to the Civic. "I'm not really comfortable with that." He raised his hands like it was no big deal. "Okay, no worries. Just asking." He didn't move right away, just stood there, kind of watching me like he was waiting for me to change my mind. I pulled on the car door, forgetting it was locked. It rattled in place. My heart sank. Ryan was still inside the station, and I couldn't see him through the glass because of the reflection from the sun. That's when a second man approached, from the other side of the lot. He looked to be around the same age, but taller, heavier. He wore a faded baseball cap and walked straight over to the first man. "You need help?" the second guy asked, voice loud and casual. "Yeah, I was just asking her," the first man said, nodding toward me. "But she's not comfortable. You mind?" "Sure." The second guy shrugged. I watched, frozen, as the second man got into the green sedan and sat in the driver's seat. He looked around for a second, then said, "There's nothing wrong with your car, man. Everything feels normal." The first guy gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. "Huh, must have fixed itself then." It was such a weird exchange. Too weird. And that's when it hit me. They were testing, seeing who'd bite, who'd follow them into a car, who was too polite to say no. I wanted to scream for Ryan. I wanted to run inside the station and grab him. But my legs wouldn't move. I felt like I was anchored there, staring at a horror movie scene in real time, only I was in it. Then, just like that, the second guy got out of the sedan, gave a nod, and walked off toward the back of the building like he'd never been involved. The first guy lingered for a second, looked over at me one last time, then got back into his car. I didn't breathe again until Ryan came out with a soda and a plastic bag in hand. The moment I saw him, I unlocked. I ran to him, words spilling out. "Ryan, that guy." He asked me to get in his car, to press the gas, and another guy showed up and did it instead. It didn't make sense, it felt wrong. Ryan's eyes narrowed and he turned to look, but the green sedan was already pulling out of the lot. "You didn't get in, right?" he asked. "No," I said, still shaking. "Good. Smart," he muttered. "You were about to get snatched." "What?" "That's how they do it, seen it on the news. They'll ask for help with something dumb, then when you're inside, that's it. Door shuts, car drives off, doesn't matter who's around, no one jumps in." "But there were people around," I whispered. "Someone could have seen. They would have helped, right?" Ryan shook his head. "Not here. People barely want to make eye contact, let alone play hero." We didn't call the police. Nothing had actually happened. That was the worst part, how close it came to something irreversible. and yet how little evidence there was of any crime. We went home. I didn't sleep that night. For days after, Uzrinya, I replayed the scene over and over. What if I had said yes? What if the second guy never showed up and it was just me and the first man? What if the door hadn't been locked? I started carrying pepper spray after that. Ryan got me one of those mini alarms that scream when you pull the pin. I never went anywhere alone for a long time, not even to the store down the street. Every car that slowed near me, every glance from a stranger, sent my heart pounding. What disturbed me most wasn't just the near miss. It was how easy it had been for them to try, in broad daylight, in public, with witnesses. Like it wasn't their first time, like they knew how people worked, how women second-guess themselves, how we don't want to be rude or overreact. I learned something that day. Not every horror comes at night. Not every monster hides. Some wait for you in the sunlight, leaning on a car, wearing calm eyes and asking you for help. And sometimes all it takes to save yourself is one word. No. But the question that still haunts me, how many people didn't say it?